Well, hello, everyone. Welcome again to the Be the Leader podcast. I'm really excited about today's guest and really excited to bring Michael Bryant to you here today. And I'll introduce him here in just a moment. But this today is a special conversation because we have a lot in common when it comes to our interests. Michael, first of all, is the president of CTS Consulting, which is a Baltimore-based multidisciplined consulting firm. But he's also an endurance athlete, and he's a 6-time Ironman triathlon finisher. For those of you who know me, you know that I love triathlon. I've been involved in triathlon for a number of years. Haven't done one for 6 years, but it's near and dear to my heart. There's so many leadership lessons that I've learned in training for triathlon. And so the conversation today with Michael is going to be spectacular. But in 1981, after he acknowledged that he was terminally unemployable, Michael founded CTS Consulting, and his focus is with both individuals and corporations. And it's been on assisting them and assisting others in creating effective working lives. So that's why I know it's going to be a spectacular conversation, maybe even a magical conversation, as one of my friends would say. Welcome to the show, Michael. Welcome to the conversation. Thank you for being on the Be the Leader podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today.
Well, it all started with a conversation with your daughter, Rachel Druckenmiller. And, we started talking and she started talking about her dad. I started talking about my dad and the influence that each of our dads had on our lives. And at the end of the conversation, I just said, Rachel, I gotta have your dad on. I gotta have a conversation with him. And she said, well, reach out to him. I'm sure he'd love it. So let's talk about like what got you involved in triathlon. Like, what was it that drew you to the sport?
Right. So I have an athletic background. So I was a high school and collegiate wrestler, and so when you finish, when you're done with that sport, there's not much you can do with it. You can't have like a pickup wrestling match, not like softball or anything.
Right.
So the only thing I could do when I was wrestling that I could do athletically otherwise was run, because I had to run to maintain weight. And so I became a runner. And
okay.
and in 1985, I was at a friend's house, and her friend was going to be the race director for a triathlon that's coming to Baltimore. So triathlon started in the 70s in California, and the only triathlon I'd ever heard of was Ironman, and Ironman's insane, so I wasn't going to do Ironman because it's like nuts.
Yes.
And so her friend said to me, have you ever thought about doing a triathlon? And I said, no, and I never would. And she said, no, it's not. No, there's other distances. This is like an Olympic distance. It's a 1.5 kilometer swim, and then a 40 kilometer bike and a 10 kilometer run. And I said, well, how many days do you have to do that? She said, no, you do it all at one time. I said, I'll die. She said,
right.
I said, I'll die. So I did it. I didn't die. And I thought, well, this is kind of cool. I had no idea how to train. There was no technology in those days. One day I'd run an hour, another day I'd swim an hour, next day I'd bike an hour. I'd do that over and over again. One day I'd take a day. I was nuts. I didn't know what I was doing. So anyway, I did that and I did numbers of those races. And the series that had come to Baltimore after 7 years, it left. And there just weren't a lot of races. So I stopped and I went back to running, worked up to marathon distance. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, my wife Nancy was raised in Albany, and in the summers they had a farmhouse outside of Lake Placid. So I meet Nancy, I come up to the Adirondacks, I follow the Adirondacks, and in about 20 years ago we bought a house up here, a vacation home. So Ironman, meanwhile, has come to Lake Placid in 1999, and so we're up here, and I just want to be part of the community. So, I volunteered for the race. I'm not doing the race because the race is like, that's stupid. I'm not doing that. So, but I volunteered. And one of the things you do when you volunteer is you go in for the last 2 hours of the finish. So you have up to 17 hours to finish the race. So the last 2 hours between 10 and midnight are when the last people are coming in. And it was mind blowing because the people that were finishing this race were not the people in appearance that you would think athletically could do something like this. And I was just blown away by this. And I generally speaking don't like to watch. Like I don't like parades because I don't watch. And I don't like to watch. And I just looked at this. I said, I'm doing this. I'm going to do that. I had no idea what I was talking about. And so this was when I was 55, I signed up to do my first one when I was 56. And then away we go after that.
Wow, that's amazing, and I I think it's interesting that you had a friend that started talking to you about triathlon. I was the exact same way. I was actually working out in a gym. It was actually a heart center rehab place that had a gym for just regular people to go and work out too. But one of the exercise physiologists there was an Ironman. He had done Ironman multiple times, and he's like, "Oh, David, you should do this." I'm like, kind of like you. How many days do you have to do that? And but like you, I started to get intrigued, and it kind of took, especially as I crossed the finish line for the first time in a sprint. There was something about it that I think the achiever in me just really like it germinated something. And so from then there were so many lessons that I learned about discipline and consistency. What have you learned about, consistency, especially in training and as it relates to leadership?
Well, so I think the important thing, particularly for leaders, is that whenever you put yourself in a difficult situation, maybe it's communicating in the organization with a particular kind of person. Maybe it's the fact that you've had a client, you lost a client, and you had to somehow come back from that. I mean, certainly numbers of leaders have had to deal with this with everything related to COVID. And I mean, when this thing first hit, I just had numbers of clients that are like, we don't know how we're going to survive.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what we're gonna do, and we don't know if we're gonna have a business. At
Right.
all. So what I found has happened is that, and I think for me, Ironman has been particularly helpful in this area. Is that when you put yourself in a position where you have to overcome an enormous amount of adversity, then what you do is you own something when you come out of that mentally that no one can take away from you. And what I find, so at least for me, what I've learned is I have ability to focus and block things out that is like locked in. And so it really doesn't matter what the adversity is. This just happens to be a physical challenge. Um, but you can put yourself through a challenge of having to be able to, I had clients in the midst of this. It's like, who wants to go on unemployment right now and who wants to come in? We'll see if we can split work. We'll work 20 hours a piece. I mean, they just didn't know what to do. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I mean, the whole model of suddenly having to go virtual and use
Yeah.
technology that you didn't have any idea how to use. I mean, if you're a knowledge worker, you've done much better than this thing because you have technology. But this ability to just be able to adapt and adjust, to your point, I have if I can share just a quick story of something that happened to me when I was training.
Absolutely.
In 2005, as I signed up for 2006, I decided that the kind of shape I was in no way going to be the kind of shape I had to be in for this kind of thing. And so I thought, we were sharing earlier off air that the course in Lake Placid actually has a cable that you can swim on. You can swim in a straight line. And so it's a 1.2 mile rectangular course, and you do it twice. They call it a loop.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, well, I think I'll go out. It was in August. We were up there in August, and I said, I think I'll go out and do like a loop, which is 1.2 miles, just because I need to start getting like moving here with this thing. It's a cloudy day, not a really good beach day, and it's kind of overcast. But I decide, off I go.
Yeah.
I'm in the water, I have my wetsuit on, and I'm in the water, so I'm wet. All of a sudden, I notice I'm getting like wetter, and
Oh
I go,
no.
it's raining. I thought, raining. I'm in the water. And then it starts really raining. Like it's like beating on me. And I can look in the distance because, you know, the lake is a pretty good sized lake, but I can look over in the distance and I see people kind of scurrying to get out of the thing. As I look over there, I look ahead and there's a big dark cloud rolling over a mountain. And I'm like, God, I'm not very good. And then I heard thunder. And I
Oh
said,
man.
man, you gotta like, this is, you know, we're done for the day. Then I saw lightning hit the end of the lake and I said, get out of this lake right now. As I broke off to swim, I heard a second crack of lightning. My right cap knotted up and then right out the top of my head. I said, you just got hit. Lightning just hit the lake and it just went through you.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I was a water safety instructor in high school and college. And and one of the things that you're taught very early is that when someone's in trouble in the water, like you don't panic. Well, they don't really tell you that you're going to be in the water. You're going in to get somebody else. And so I thought, well, you know, you better not panic because it's not going to work well. I came up with a plan.
Yeah.
My plan was I'm gonna, because I can still swim. I will I'll swim, then I'll stop and tread water, scream for somebody to come get me, put my head down, swim, swim, scream, swim, scream, swim, scream. One of three things is gonna happen. Somebody's gonna come get me. I'm gonna reach shore, or I'm gonna get hit again, and that's the only three things I can come up with. Off I go. I put my plan into action. There, unbeknownst to me, there was a guy in a metal rowboat that had the presence of mind to get out. I'm the only knucklehead in the lake. There's nobody out there. But, now, by the way, the other thing you learn in water safety instructors, you don't go in the water by yourself. That's another movie, though. That's a story for another day. That I was
Right.
already in violation of that. That's a little late in the day, though, because you know, you are where you are. And so I started. So he had called 911, but I didn't know that. And there was a boat rental place and two girls were putting away the boats and they heard me and they came out in two-man plastic kayaks, get to me. Really, they were really moving. They got to me. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay, but I'd rather get out of the water. And you know, they come and get me, they pull me out, and away we go. I get to shore, I'm okay. But I thought about that and I said, there's a presentation I do called Iron Lessons to organizations. And I thought about, you know, what happens when lightning strikes? Because lightning strikes our lives, lightning strikes our organizations.
Yeah.
Unforeseen things can happen out of nowhere. And when that happens, what do you do? Well, the first thing you have to do is you need to have a plan. Now, you don't know if you're going to be able to execute the plan or not, but you have to come up with a plan, you know. And so that was sort of the first lesson that I learned from that I'm able to apply to sort of like leadership is that, you know, things, you know, change can happen suddenly. And when that happens, you know, and then the next thing I learned about was that when it happens, you have to ask for help. I mean, I'm not getting out of that lake by myself as fast as I got out with them. And oftentimes, one of the things I'll find with leaders sometimes is they like to be very self-reliant. I can handle this. I can do that. I don't think much of any significance in our lives was done alone. I love the concept. I am self-taught. Oh, really? You like wrote the book you read? Oh, that was.
That's
How
right.
did you do that? Wow, like with no help from anybody, like ever. That's like amazing. Like, I'd
Yeah.
like tell me about that because I'd like to learn about that one if I don't know that one. And
Right.
then what I found was that when these things happen, the important thing is to figure out what the lessons are. What you have to do is you have to be brutally honest with what's gone on, but you have to do it in a non-judgmental way. So in other words, I'm not out there beating myself up like you dummy. Like, what are you doing in the middle thing? I'm like, I gotta get out of the water. I mean, so
Right.
you know, you get yourself into like people do like silly kinds of. They get into silly thinking when this happens. You know, I should have had a plan for what, like a pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, what's your
Right.
pandemic plan? Oh yeah, well I'm gonna go to like 1918 and this. But like, no, you're not. Like,
Yeah.
that. Like, that's like
Right.
I didn't have a if I get struck by lightning plan. I've never been struck by lightning. I mean, I don't have a. I mean, I do now, but I didn't then. And then,
Yeah.
and then I think the last thing is to figure out like, so what did you learn? Well, I
Hmm.
can tell you, it's kind of funny now to go in the water with me because if there's not at least some blue, like I'm not going in. I mean, I don't swim on completely over. Just not. I've actually gone in the water in my wetsuit and turned around and walked out and taken it off. They're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm
Oh
like,
my goodness. That's
I got
hilarious.
hit by lightning. They're like, "Well, better you than me." So I think there's all kinds of lessons there. That's what I really love about the sport, particularly at this point, because you know, I mean, there's first of all, there's a very small group of people that will ever do this on the planet anyway, and
Hmm.
so I feel very blessed and very fortunate to be able to even do it, to be
Hmm.
able to to be have the wherewithal where I can be thinking about things like training. I mean, I'm not thinking
Right.
where my next meal's coming from or anything, and
Right.
also as I've aged, just more and more people, I mean, I turned 70. Nobody's doing this thing at 70. So you can do better and better because they're all dead. So, and as my friend said, I have a friend that have a 79-year-old friend, Murray, and Murray's new philosophy is if I can't outrun you, I'll outlive you. So,
There you go. That's so funny. I figured, when I was doing a lot of my racing, I thought the same thing. It's like, you know what? I'm never gonna win my age bracket, and that's okay. I'm just gonna outlast them.
and you can get to the point. I discovered by accident in 2016. I was training Rachel, my son-in-law, Rachel's husband, Bill. He was going to do his first one, and he had not done a half Ironman. So I said, well, let's go to Raleigh, North Carolina, and we'll do one there. I have family in North Carolina. And we did the race, and I finished the race, and my time was like, it was okay. Well, the next morning, I thought, I wonder how I did because I was in the 65 to 69 age group. Well, I found out that like my not so very good times in my 50s were actually very good times. So I ended up finished second in my age group. I'm like, holy smokes, you're like a competitor now. So that, and that's what happens in business sometimes. You have an
Yeah.
idea. First of all, starting a business on the surface is insane.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this thing. How are you going to do this thing? I'm going to figure it out. I mean, because you have to have like confidence that almost borders on arrogance sometimes. It's like, oh, really? Oh, you're going to pull this off? Yeah, I'm going to pull it off. How? I don't know. I'm going to pull it off. I'm going to figure this out. And I remember because Rachel and her brother Zach are like 15 months apart, so we had like delayed twins, and so my wife Nancy was to stay at home, and I was the deal. Like I was the
Yeah.
whole shebang. And I
Yeah.
remember she'd come up to me and she would say, "Do you have like any like clients this month?" And I said, "Well, did I have clients last month?" She said, "I will." I said, "Well, because I have to figure it out. Because I
Of
have to,
course.
of course, I have to support us. I'll figure it out."
Right. Right.
It's amazing what you can do when you really have to. I mean, it really focuses your mind. I mean,
Right.
and that's the other thing I think what happens is that so many people spend time worrying about what's going to happen if this or that doesn't happen. It takes enough energy to solve the problem without siphoning off energy about what will happen if the problem's not there. I
Mm,
mean, there's
that's
actually
great.
there's actually research that's been done on worry, and what they found is half the things you worry about never happen. Like it's nothing, like zero, like not,
Right.
like zilch. And of the 50% where something does happen, only 5% of the time is it as bad as you thought it was going to be, and on rare occasion it can actually be worse than you thought it was going to be. So that means in the aggregate, 2.5% of the time we're actually onto something. But
Yeah.
we spend, and particularly with this thing that's going on, one of the they threw that word around like a hand grenade, the new normal. This is the new
Yeah.
normal.
Right.
And,
Right.
it's kind of there are lots of new normals.
Yeah.
When you get
Yeah.
married, it's a new normal. When you have kids, it's a new normal. When you start your own business, it's a new normal. When you
Mm,
when you're put in a role to lead people, it's a new normal. The difference between this one is that there's no adult alive from the 1918 pandemic you can talk to. All of
right.
the other ones have people you can go to get advice.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So we're all kind of like trying to figure it out as we go along.
Yes, yes.
Um,
Like our lives.
exactly. And I think that that's a great, I'm so glad you brought that up, Michael, because I think that that is such a great leadership lesson that everything we do, we just have to figure it out. And
Yes.
sometimes we have to suspend our need to know how
Right.
and just take one step at a time. Just
Yes.
take one step, and that's going to reveal the next step. And I know that when I've done triathlons too, that it's a mental game. And I know that like at about the 6 or 7 mile mark, on a half Ironman,
Yeah.
I'm telling myself, hey, look, I'm almost there. I'm halfway. I just got to keep going. And then it's like the next mile. It's like, okay, I got one more mile. I'll hit an aid station, one more mile. So it's that self-talk. Talk a little bit about that. Like, how important is self-talk to you in in triathlon, and then in our leadership journey too?
Right. Self-taught to me is what makes all the difference,
Mm-hmm.
because what you need to finish a race is the same thing you need to basically finish whatever you're trying to do, which is confidence. And confidence is nothing more than a conversation you have with yourself about what you perceive as doable and possible. The interesting thing about a race is that, in the like I've had people say to me, so like, like, how do you feel when you're out there? And I'm like, I don't feel like much of anything. It's a problem solving day is what it is. It's a problem
Right.
solving. And
Right.
I'm just out wherever I am, being where I am. And one of the things about it that makes it unique is that it's one of the few days I guess adults, we're not very good at being in the present. We tend to have one foot in the future thinking about what we're going to do, and one foot in the past thinking about what we should have done, and we miss the present, which is why as you age, time goes faster. It doesn't really go faster, it goes as fast as it is, but you're not there. Like little children like own the present. Like, like,
Yes.
they're like the mayor of the present. Like they live there. When
Yeah.
this thing first happened, time got warped for people. When we had when we had March was like I remember reading something where somebody said, the longest years of my life were like 2007, 2012, and March. It's like it went on like forever because
Right.
time, because you were only where you were because you didn't know what you were going to do. And then gradually concepts like weekends came back, and what day of the week it was began to have something, because we adapt and adjust to that. But the mindset in a race, particularly at 140.6 miles, like, it's not physically something that's really going on. I mean, my body's shot by the time I've gotten to the halfway through to your point, like halfway through the run. It's just like I'm playing all kinds of games in my head. It's like,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
get it, and I hit little landmarks, and I get to this one, and I get to that one, and it's that kind of thing. And what happens in terms of a leadership role, there's a couple of things. First of all, in a race, there's transparency. Like, when somebody's tired because they look tired. I mean, you can't
Right.
fake that. But that's one of the things that I think leaders do to their detriment, is they try to look like they have it all together.
Uh,
Like, people know when you don't because you act like you don't. I mean, it's
right.
like, it's like, I mean, leading people to me is very interesting in terms of its analogy to parenting in a couple of ways. First of all, there are dynamics in an organization that are very similar to a family. So coworkers are kind of like siblings, and
Mm-hmm.
you kind of want your siblings to understand you're all in the same boat. It's not a good idea to rat out a sibling. It's not a good idea to turn on a sibling. You need to kind of figure out what that person wants. And as an employee, you want what family members want. You want leaders and people at the top that you can feel proud of associating with. You want to be proud that that's my family, and I feel good about my family. There's a very protective core oftentimes to families. I mean, to organizations like families. Like, look, we can talk to ourselves this way. Don't invite from the outside, like, come after us, because we'll circle the wagons. And it's a very
Right.
interesting. And what leaders want very much what parents want. Whenever you have a child, you don't know what you're doing. I mean, it's the most important job ever created, handed off to rank amateurs. There is no job, and you're going to form another human being, and you need no qualifications except to have one. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, what other job do you have that with? So, when you're in an organization and you're leading people, what parents understand is that they're doing things for their children because they love their children, and their children don't know everything they do,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay, because
Yeah.
that's one reason they do it. And leaders are the same way; they're taking care of their people. But on occasion, like, it's okay, like, if your kid says something nice to you, I mean, that's not bad. I mean,
Right.
that. I mean,
Right.
or ideas as opposed to problems and complaints, because they're out there shagging those fly balls all day long. And it puts leaders oftentimes in a position where it's like, well, I have to appear like I have it all together.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's probably okay for you to say, well, I don't really know what to do,
Mm.
or let's think about that. And again, it goes back to the analogy. And when I was in the lake, it's like, well, let's get some help on that one. And
Right.
sometimes just to say something, well, what do you think of that? Now, having said that, organizations are not democracies. I mean, they're
Right.
not, they're limited participatory democracy. People have a right to be treated with respect, but people are not equal. They're not
Mm.
equally vested. They're not equally creative. They're not equally at risk. They're not equal. And that's just not true.
Right.
And so, if you own the business and the business goes under, you lose everything.
Right.
The people
Right.
that work for you go get another job, you know,
Right.
and you're always trying to balance this very delicate equation, which I've seen more often than I can ever remember, which is you care about people. I love Rachel's concept of the soul behind the role, and I just love
Yes.
that concept. And it's really being able to say these are human beings, and I have leaders that really dearly love the people in their organization. They care about them deeply as human beings, and you have to balance that though. But this is a business,
Right.
no margin, no mission. I mean,
Hmm.
we've got to keep we've got to make money.
Right. Right.
You've got to do the thing. You're always trying to balance that. You'll find situations where this person is very ill, and we want to support them, but somebody's got to do their job because
Right.
they're not here. And
Right.
what does that mean if they can't come back for 6 months? I mean, are we going to take that person back off that job? It gets really tricky.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's a lot. I love your analogy to parenting, because I think you're so right. Because sometimes as a parent, we can be loving, but we also, I mean, there's a part of us that has to get the job done,
Yes.
and we need to be able to help our kids
Yeah.
to be able to complete. And
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah.
That's where the whole model of correction versus criticism comes in. There's no need to criticize. I love the concept constructive criticism. I remember talking to a group of longshoremen. I mean, these are like these are like duty dudes,
Yeah.
and they said to me, well, "What about constructive criticism?" I said, when was the last time you got home and the person at home said, "How was your day?" And you said, "Great, but I didn't get a criticism." It's just like dumping on me right now. I think I could use one. I said, constructive criticism is an oxymoron. There's nothing constructive about criticizing somebody. If I criticize you, first of all, I'm judging you. If I
Yes.
the minute I judge you, I probably have objectified you.
Hmm.
And as soon as I objectify you, now you're an object. I can do anything I want to. You're not a person. Ever think about like in war? In war, we never have people kill people. We have combatants. We have what happens in an organization, particularly when you're in sort of a survival mode and when you're in a reactive mode, is that you can lose your patience with the people because you're under stress. You know, and just when that happens, that's when we begin to act the fool when we're under a lot of stress. It's a lower brain function stress, and
Right.
so we tend to be reactive. And those in those particular points in your role in the organization, you can become very short with people and begin to get critical. And when you become critical, I love this concept of constructive criticism.
Yeah.
Like working with these longshoremen once, and it's like, and they asked the question, "What about constructive criticism?" And I said, "When was the last time you came home and like, how was your day?" "Well, it was
Right.
great, but I couldn't do criticism." There's nothing constructive about criticism. You do need to correct sometimes, but
Right.
but but there's no
Right.
place for criticism. And so here's the difference. If I criticize you, what I've done is I've turned you into an object. So if you think about in war,
Mm.
um, what happens is we never like we don't. It's like this person didn't kill that person. It was like we talk about body counts. We talk about casualties. We talk about combatants. We talk
Right.
about derogatory names for the other side.
Yeah.
But what happens is it seems that humans are not very good at harming same species. But if I turn you into a thing, then I can do whatever I want to you, because now you're just an object to me. So if I criticize you, I basically first of all judged you, and if I
Right.
judge you, I say by judging you, the act of judging you says that you are in some way less than me. You are
Uh,
less attentive. You are less responsible. You are less concerned. You're somehow less than me, and now I can have at you. And
hmm.
so if I criticize you, I'm basically going to talk about something about your person. You didn't and you don't. If I'm correcting you, and we do need to correct sometimes, we do. Sometimes something
Sure.
not being done the way it needs to be done. Correction is about the behavior, not about the person. You know.
Yes.
So this, and it wouldn't matter who did it. This is the way we did it. This is the way we did it. Whether Jew or the Dalai Lama, it doesn't matter who's doing it. It needs to be done this way. Criticism talks about what the person didn't do. Correction addresses what you need in its place.
Ah,
So
I love that.
this is what happened. This is what we need in this place. And the last thing that differentiates correction from criticism is correction always includes an offer for help. So this
Mm,
is what's going on. This is what's happening because of that. This is what we need
yeah.
to do. How can we help? You know, tell me what you need.
Yeah, I love that distinction, and I love the how you have talked about the behavior, because there's a difference between a behavior and attacking the person,
Yes.
or or as you said, criticizing the person, the humanity of that person. That's such a great distinction, and I hope the leaders that are watching get that, because I know that sometimes there are people, there are different personalities who don't like to correct, but it's a necessary thing. And I know that in the work that I do with culture, we talk about behaviors, and
Mhm.
behaviors are separate than the person. And so I need to know if I'm behaving in a way that's not going to help us to accomplish our mission in this organization or in this
Yeah.
family.
Yeah, you actually had an article that yesterday that I was commenting on. I thought I really liked your article, and because you're talking about cultures. And one of the things that I really like to do with cultures is to basically help them come with a code of conduct. Uh,
Yes,
and
exactly.
I call it a code of conduct because a code of conduct is behavior driven, and,
Absolutely.
and behavior is really all you can't really measure intent. You know,
Right.
I love people that'll say things like, well, I know why they did that. I am not that gifted. I am not telepathic. I do not know what's in someone else's mind. I'm in
Yeah.
my mind all day and I don't know what's going on half the time. I have no idea.
Right.
I have to go the slow route and actually ask, like, could you help me understand? Because what happens when you're dealing with human beings, there's always a three-part process that's going on with human beings: connection, connection ruptured, and connection restored.
Mm.
That's the state of being a human being: connection, connection ruptured, and connection restored.
Yeah, that's an interesting process, and or an interesting thought. Where you have connection, or
Yeah.
it's interrupted, or it's
Huh.
restored. That's fascinating. How did you
Yeah.
come up with that?
Well, that's actually so. One of my mentors is the relational therapist Harville Hendricks, and Harville Hendricks is a marriage relationship um, psychologist, um, and he is one of the things I love to do is surround myself by like people that are so smart they make your head hurt,
I
and
love it. Yeah.
Harville's 85 years old, and I have access to him, and so he talks to me about the secrets of the known universe, and so this whole
Mm,
concept of being relational is what really leading other people is really about,
mm,
and the ability to be able to say, I will often give people this quiz. What do you think you need to have to be a leader? And there's only one thing. There's only one thing you have to be a leader. So people will answer the question, we have to have charisma. I'm like, no, there's some really non-charismatic leaders out there. You have to have connections. No, there are people that come out of nowhere. They're like,
mm.
well, okay, what? I'm like, followers. You have to have
Yeah.
followers. It's the only thing you have to be a leader. If you
Right.
don't have those, you can't be a
You
leader.
can't lead.
That's it.
Right.
You can have
Right.
everything else, but you don't have that. You ain't lead. You lead yourself, but you don't have that. And it's
Uh,
a question is, how do I get people to follow? You
mm,
know, well, first of all, they have to feel safe.
yeah.
They
Mm,
have to feel safe, and if they're going to feel safe, well, how do I, how do I have them feel safe? Well, you have to be curious about them.
yeah.
You have to give them the benefit of the doubt. You have
Right.
to not make assumptions about them. You have to suspend judgment about them.
Mm,
And
yeah.
because if I'm not safe, or if you're not safe, we're going to be defended.
Mm-hmm.
When we're defended, we tend to we only do one or two things. We're kind of like amoeba this way. We either tend to act out, or we tend to basically withhold.
Mm,
And I tell leaders are information junkies. You
Yeah.
have to know what's going on outside of your frame of reference. If you don't know, you're flying blind. And people that are not safe are not going to tell you what's going on.
Yeah.
And if they
Well,
feel threats, they're not going to feel safe.
well, and two, just on that point, isn't that really one of the more important parts about leaders? What you were talking about earlier too is surrounding yourself with people who are much smarter than me, so that I can learn from them and I actually get different perspectives.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
that there's too often this mentality that leaders have to have it all figured out and that my way is the right way, when in reality, I'm only looking at one half of the beach ball.
Yes, yeah. It's sort of, I often will put people at a table and I'll say to them, so look around the room and tell me what you see. Everybody sees something different, but I guarantee what each of you see is real. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, leaders have to have the ability to do is get up from where they're sitting and sit on that person's side of the table and see what they're seeing from their point of view, because everybody's sense makes sense to them.
Yes, right.
You're not making it to anybody else, you know. And what happens is, it's interesting when people don't agree with us, we often attack their mental health. What are you,
Right,
nuts? Are you crazy? What, out of your mind? Were you off your rocker? I mean, like how can you think that way? Well, I don't know, because like I'm not you. You know,
right,
I mean that's how you get a full view of what's going on, is through other perspectives. You know, I mean this, this whole 360 evaluation process they came up with was just essentially that, was
right.
intended to be what everybody was seeing around the table. I mean, it was really,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I know we're coming up on our time limit here, and I want to be respectful of your time, Michael. Let's talk about, is there anything that you feel like is something that you would give an emerging leader or a young leader who is just starting out on their journey? Maybe, maybe even something from your past, I know that if I'm not mistaken, some of my research showed that you were a history teacher at the beginning of your career, right?
Yes, I was. And what happened was that there are these, change happens in an instant. You hit, you decided to do a half Ironman,
Right.
and you hit the switch and you said, okay, now I have to go through the training and everything. But I mean, that changed. Maybe the time leading up to it was important. But I mean, when you're standing in the water and they're guns getting ready to go off, it's like, this is real. Like, here I go.
Right.
Here I
Right.
go. I've now made the decision and game on.
Game
Well,
on. Yeah.
that's what happens when you make the decision to start a business. Is like game over. And what happens is that I think there are, for many people, moments in their lives where they have these epiphanies.
Mm,
Where they go from this side. Mine was, I was 26 years old. I'm standing up in front of a group of 14-year-old girls at 8 o'clock in the morning talking about the Missouri Compromise. And a little voice in my head said to me, and I mean, you can just imagine how enthralled ninth graders were about the Missouri Compromise at 8
sure.
o'clock. I mean, I basically just had people there trying to not keep their head off the desk. And I went,
Right.
I thought I was a pretty good teacher, actually. So I'm like, well, how excited are they? This little voice in my head said, I don't know what I'm going to be doing when I'm 40, but it ain't going to be this. I mean, that's not happening. What happens, sometimes just hitting that switch takes you in that direction. So let's say you're an emerging leader and you said, I'm now going to start my own business, try to create a path in the organization I'm in to get to a point where I'm going to be able to lead people, whatever that decision is. At
Mhm.
that particular point, I think the most important thing that you can begin to practice is humility and transparency. It's like,
Mhm.
in other words, I'm going to need help. Maybe I'm going to need support. I mean, I have a remarkable wife. My wife is like, she's amazing. Um,
I, I
and
think any wife that'll put up with a triathlete is amazing.
yeah, this is true. This is true. But of course, now Nancy's become a triathlete. So Nancy and I actually trained together.
Oh, you
And
infected her.
oh my gosh, I infected so many of them. I mean, Rachel's little sister's done 3 of them. She did her first when she was 18 years old. I mean, oh yeah,
That's
they're all.
awesome.
And most of the family's a mess. Rachel's saying, Rachel listened to that. Rachel was watching it. Even her poor husband got pulled into it.
That's good.
But what happens is, the idea, first of all, is you need to be transparent. You need to be vulnerable.
Mm,
And again, going back to the water, you need to ask for help, because there are certain
yeah.
things that you're not going to understand, and nobody expects you to.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
it's like it's okay to say, I don't understand. Let me get back to you on that one. How did you do that? I mean, to this day, I surround myself with this amazingly smart people that I can go to. I probably learn most of what I do from my clients by now. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're the teachers. I mean,
Right.
I go to class, and it's really
Yeah.
interesting because I have a theory going in to see a client about what we're going to talk about. That's oftentimes off the table within 2 seconds. I
Right.
mean, they teach me what we need to talk about. I mean,
Right.
I'm like, we're not talking about that. You need to talk about this. Like, okay, we'll talk about that.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yes. I totally get it. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yeah.
Michael, this has been such an amazing conversation. There are so many lessons in this conversation that you've shared, and I'm so appreciative of your time today. So you talked about a talk that you give, lessons from, what was the title of it? Lessons from
Iron lessons.
Iron
Iron lessons.
Lessons. Yeah, I love that.
Kind of my everyman story. I mean, I love going in front of a group of like 400 people because if you saw me physically, I'm the last person on earth that, I mean, I wrestled 95 pounds in high school. Okay. I mean, that's just to give you perspective
Okay.
because there was no weight lighter than 95 pounds in high school. In college at the time, the lowest weight was 118 pounds. And, and that was as low as they got. So, and I didn't, I remember when Rachel's brother Zach was little, he said to me, "Daddy, when I grow up, will I be bigger than you?" I said, "Honey, everybody will be bigger than me." I love going up there because I'm the last person you think, and
That's great.
it's kind of my everyman story.
Yeah.
I'm a regular guy. I'm a
Right.
regular guy that that does these kinds of things. And it's just kind of like we're all kind of like regular people out there just trying to do the best we can. I
Right.
mean, we all get up in the morning, and that's our goal today. Like, I'm just going
Yeah.
to try to do the best I can. And I think that's really important for all of us. I really think it's really important for leaders to remember, like, just do the best you can. All you got to do is hit the ground tomorrow morning and get a do-over. I mean,
Yeah.
it's okay. Yeah. So that's, Iron Lessons is just my story of the lessons that I've learned at this point. I still love to race and I still love to compete, but it long ago became, what lessons am I going to learn this time?
Yeah.
That long ago became that's what excites me now. It's
Yeah.
just, I wonder what's going to happen today. This will be a,
Yeah. Man, that is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. And I think, the things that you've learned, you can transfer to your clients. And I'm so grateful that you're transferring them to our listeners today as well. So I would just, how do people get a hold of you, or how would they, follow you? Where do you show up in
oh
the
yeah.
world?
So yes, the number two, go to ctsonline.com. And I'm on LinkedIn at Michael Bryant on LinkedIn. Um, and so I'd love to hear from you. And I post often on LinkedIn, and so I
Awesome.
love to connect with people on that. That's my favorite platform to connect with.
Excellent.
Yeah, so
Excellent.
that's those are the kinds of ways to connect. I like to I like to people with three of these sort of Ironmanisms that we get at the beginning of the race. The first one is take what the day gives you.
Mm,
The next one is all you control is your attitude,
mm.
and the third is we'll see you at the finish line.
I
And I
love
think
that.
it's a great way to do a race and a great way to go through your day.
Yes, I so agree. Oh my gosh, Michael, that's beautiful. That's a great way to end our time together today. And thank you so much for the wisdom that you shared. Thank you so much for the time that we've been able to share together here today. Very, very grateful. Um, Please reach out to Michael, get to know him, connect with him on LinkedIn, go to his website. I'll put the link in the or down below this video. Thank you for watching as well. Watching, listening, wherever you're listening from. I really appreciate your attention and your engagement with this podcast. So until next time, be the leader.